My dad's Louis Kryk. He's an engineer. He went to White, which was the Western Ontario Institute of Technology, the forebearer of St. Clair College. And my mom worked part-time at St. Clair College for years and years in the admissions office. My older sister is Luann, my younger brother Jason, and my younger sister Julie. After graduating from Centennial in 1982, I was going to be an engineer like my dad and my good friends, and we're all going to become engineers. And after a year I realized that other than the math and the science, I love the engineering. So I was out of that, and then went into communication studies at U of W and got my BA in 1985. And my last year there was a journalism course, the first one they ever had. I really enjoyed it. I really liked it. I liked the thrill of crafting a story. And it wasn't creative writing, it was real. And for me, nonfiction has always held a far greater weight. So after graduating from University of Windsor, the instructor said, you should become a journalist. And that was the first time anybody had ever said, you are good at this and you should do that for a living. His name was Joe Fox. And so he said, why don't you look at the St. Clair College? Bob and Sue McKenzie run a great program there. And that's exactly what I did. I gave them a call, met Bob, met Sue, and it was, I said right away, okay, I'm coming here. And when they told me especially that I could go right into third year and miss the first two because I had my degree, which was a pretty novel thing at that time that St. Clair was doing. I went right into third year, and I was just at St. Clair for the 1 year. My first job in newspapers was up at Timmins at the Daily Press, which was the first newspaper of the Thompson Empire. So I was in Timmins for a year, and I was a sports writer there, which is what I wanted to become. And I covered everything from lawn darts competitions to equestrian to hockey, minor hockey, the works. It was a great training ground, and everything that Bob and Sue McKenzie taught me at St. Clair, it was seamless. A year later, I got a job as sports editor at the Sudbury Star. A little closer to home, about halfway, 4 hours further south, and that was what I was hoping to do. I was hoping to get back down to Windsor. Still haven't made it, but one of those days. It was 2 years that I spent there, and they were magnificent years. Again, as an editor, I was growing. I was learning how to run a section, how to manage people, and I was only in my early 20s, so it was a heck of a challenge at that time. The biggest thing that I covered there would have been the World Junior Track and Field Championships, which at the time was the event, even more than any Olympics to that point, where there were more countries competing than at any time in the history of the planet. I think it was 188 countries. During those World Junior Track and Field Championships in Sudbury, took a photo of a long jumper with some of the great camera equipment that my dad gave me. I won an Ontario Wire News Photo Award for that long jump shot. And my brother Jason is, as I'd said, one of the greatest sports photographers, or the sports photographers or newspaper photographers, period, in Canada. But he doesn't have a sports photo award, and I do. So there you go, Jay. Then I applied in 1989 to a bunch of newspapers in the Toronto Sun sports department, which is now renowned then and now is the best in Canada. They liked what they saw in me, and I was at that point not so much in writing. I was leaning toward design. I really felt I had a particular acumen in newspaper layout and design, and that's what they hired me for. So after spending a few years on the sports desk at the Toronto Sun, before I was even 30 years old, I was promoted to the #2 editor in the department underneath Scott Morrison. And at the end of the decade, the managing editor, or the new editor-in-chief at the time, the new editor-in-chief, Mike Strobel, wanted the entertainment department to be as good and as well run as the sports department. Since 2006, I've been the national entertainment editor at Sun Media, which is the parent company for the Toronto Sun, where we own newspapers now across the country and most of the dailies in Ontario. Like a lot of kids in Windsor, I grew up a big sports fan of the Detroit area sports teams. And I grew up being a Wings fan and a Tigers fan, and eventually started watching and listening over the radio to Michigan football games, and that then just became my passion. It remains my extracurricular passion, and I think more than the average fan, though, and maybe it's because I wasn't in Detroit, have family there and friends there, of course, but maybe just as a way to try to connect to being there more, I became really obsessed with the history of Michigan football. And the rivalry that had just begun after a 35-year layoff when I became a fan in the late 70s was the Michigan-Notre Dame series. And so when I looked into why they hadn't played for most of a 70-some-odd year period, it had never really been satisfactorily written or answered by any newspaper articles or anything that I'd seen. So I started seriously looking into this, and there was nothing that was ever written that explained why didn't they play. They're only a 2.5-hour drive apart, Michigan, Notre Dame. They're the most popular teams in the Midwest and maybe even in the whole of the United States. But who is this kid from Windsor to be looking into something like this? And so when I started my journalism career and then got away from the writing and more into the desking and the editing side in the 90s, I thought, I'm going to seriously research this. So for 3 years, I was going to the libraries and the archives at Michigan and at Notre Dame, which is on high in the building behind Touchdown Jesus, the famous monument on the side of the library at Notre Dame campus. And for 3.5 years, I did interviews and talked to Bo Schembechler in his office and Lou Holtz and all the big name people, and eventually needed to find a publisher. And by good chance, I met another Canadian who was a college football historian of note named Murray Sperber, who put me on to his agent. And the book came out in 1994 called Natural Enemies. And at the time, it didn't get a lot of traction because there were a lot of Michigan and Notre Dame books at the time. But it did come out when the rivalry was red hot, when Michigan was playing Notre Dame, and that was even bigger than the Ohio State game for a few years. And I guess long after I'm gone, if there's one thing that will last and I'm really proud of, it's that book, Natural Enemies, because it rewrote a lot of angles of the Michigan football history as well as Notre Dame's, and it's going to stand the test of time as one of the best history books that was written. That was told me by Lloyd Carr, the Michigan football coach, and so I'm really proud of that. Well, I have a great wife, and with all the hours that I put in at the Sun, my wife Melinda she puts up with a lot. My wife and 4 kids, they're the joy of my life. Every time I come to Windsor, there's something new, or I get lost on some streets that I never thought I'd ever get lost, or neighborhoods. But I keep hearing from family and seeing for myself all the different changes that are happening to St. Clair College, and it's great. The new Mediaplex that St. Clair College is opening, great decision, because that's exactly what the young journalists of today and the journalism leaders of tomorrow, they need to be equipped with these skills. And I'm telling you, I work with several St. Clair College graduates, and journalism, I'm sure it applies across the board. Our graduates are right there competing for the best jobs and getting the best jobs with all of them.